Here's a painting of Beethoven that makes him look like a great monument up on a pedestal somewhere. And this is the Beethoven we think of. He's become such a cultural icon that he's, Schroeder in Peanuts plays his little toy piano. There's a song called Roll Over Beethoven. Everything is about, Beethoven is kind of a meme for classical music. Well, and his Ninth Symphony is the summary of all of that. We all know the Ninth Symphony, or at least we know the tune. This is the symphony that has the tune in it. I'm sure you know what tune I mean, but just in case there's anybody here who doesn't remember, here's a place in the last movement of Beethoven's Ninth Symphony where the tune comes back. We've had the tune, we've had it played in a whole bunch of variations by the orchestra. A bunch of singers have appeared and they've sung it. And then it goes away and the orchestra does some weird stuff. And then as it's coming back, Beethoven sort of halts everything. And he does this thing, he sort of makes you wait for it. You know something important's coming and he says, wait for it. Here's that passage. That tune, we know that tune. It's been turned into a Protestant hymn, joyful, joyful, we adore thee. I've heard it used to sell Fords, more new wagons, more new wagons. It's actually been adopted by the European Union, the European community as its anthem. And they say that the modern compact disc, well, it's not so modern anymore, but the compact disc is the size it is because of the importance that Beethoven's Ninth Symphony has in Japan as a New Year's thing. Every New Year's, the Ninth Symphony gets performed all over Japan. And when the Philips company and the Sony company were creating this new optical drive, they said, well, how big should it be? And the Sony people said it can be any size you want as long as Beethoven's Ninth Symphony fits on one side of it. So that, at least according to legend, is why the CD is the size it is. Well, I'd like to think with you a little bit about some of the things that we know. We know the tune and all the things it's come to mean, but also some of the things that Beethoven's audience knew in May of 1824 when they went to a concert that had this symphony in it for the first time ever. They knew some things that we don't know. And when we think about those, we find it sort of interesting. I hope you'll agree. One thing they knew was the poem. You know that Beethoven takes a poem, an ode by Germany's second most famous poet, Mr. Schiller, and he takes words from that ode and uses them as the words, some of which we just heard, for the singing in the last movement. It's a song called Ode to Joy. What Beethoven's audience knew, and we may not know, is that it's a drinking song. Beethoven didn't take all the words from Schiller's Ode to Joy. He left out a lot of the ones that have to do with guys sitting around a table and raising their glasses and talking about fun and fellowship and drinking and so forth. But Schiller's song was meant to be in the spirit of those kinds of songs that gentlemen's societies sing when they when they get together. In my university, there's an institution called the Harvard Glee Club that was founded about the time of Beethoven. And in Boston, down the street from me, there's something called the Handel and Haydn Society that was founded in 1814 by a bunch of gentlemen who wanted to get together, drink, socialize, and sing songs about the ladies, you know, wine, women, and song. And it was customary all over the world to do that. In London, there was a club called the Glee Club. And what they did was get together, drink, and sing songs called glees. Now, the Glee Club, you think I'm getting off the track. You think I'm in the wrong lecture here. I'm not. The Glee Club in London had as its kind of theme song, the song that they sang at every meeting, a song whose words were the Anacreontic Hymn. The Anacreontic song is one that asks Anacreon, the imaginary god of wine and of poetry, to be their patron. And he says, I will be your patron. Because he does poetry and harmony and he's a drinker, he's a perfect kind of patron. And he says, besides, I'll instruct you like me to entwine the myrtle of Venus with Bacchus's vine. Venus, that's the beautiful girl. Bacchus's vine, that's the drinking, and we're singing. Well, that poem was very well known in America. And there was a fellow named Francis Scott Key, who, when he was observing the bombardment in Baltimore Harbor, wrote a poem to be sung to the Anacreontic song. Mr. Francis Scott Key's poem begins, "Oh, say, can you see?" So the Anacreontic song went, to Anacreon in heaven as he sat in full glee. And you just take it and sing it to Mr. Francis Scott Key's words, "Oh, say, can you see?" And you've got a timeless song. So you might say that Mr. Francis Scott Key took a drinking song and turned it into America's national anthem, and that Beethoven took a drinking song and turned it into the world's national anthem. It certainly is full of sentiments that have resounded down the ages. All men should be brothers. Alle Menschen werden Brüder. We don't say it that way in today's inclusive world. We say, I guess, all humankind should be siblings. But, you know, it's a good kind of sentiment. Anyhow, we need to transport ourselves to Vienna in 1824. Many of you maybe have been to Vienna, and you'll know that it looks a little bit different from this. In 1824, there was a great big open space around the center of the city, an open space called the Glacis, and no matter how you approached the city, you had to cross it. The reason for that is the Glacis was intended to be wider than the throw of a 17th century cannon. The Viennese remembered that they were the eastern outpost of Western civilization, that they had been besieged by the Turks, and they needed to be able to protect their inner city. Here's a map of Vienna printed in 1824 in London, the same year that the Ninth Symphony was first performed. So that if you'd gone from the United States by way of London to hear the symphony, you could have bought this map and brought it with you. And across the bottom of the map are pictures of all the monuments that you want to go visit. Anyhow, what you can see is the old medieval center of the city, dark in the middle, surrounded by the Glacis. The beautiful blue Danube flows across the top of the map. And then outside the Glacis are what they call the suburbs, more streets and houses and shops and things, with a further set of walls around outside that, which are really more toll gates than defenses. Anyhow, in the center of the medieval city, you can still see the arrowhead-shaped bastions of the all around the fortifications of the inner city. You can see the harpsichord-shaped footprint of the palace of the emperors of Austria and kings of Hungary, the headquarters of a great big polyglot empire. And you can see right in the center, kind of like a spider sitting in her web, the footprint of the great Gothic St. Stephen's Cathedral. All of these fortifications have now been removed and replaced with a series of boulevards called the Ringstraßen, the ring streets. But these boulevards, the same happened to many other medieval cities, all the grand boulevards of Paris and so forth. The word boulevard and bulwark are actually the same word. A boulevard is a street that replaces an old bulwark. And now the Glacis is full of museums and the new concert hall and the new opera house and so forth. But this is what it looked like in Beethoven's day. And from wherever you were in the center of the city, you could see the tower, the steeple of St. Stephen's Cathedral. This is the view that Mozart had of it when he stuck his head out the window of the apartment he lived in while he was composing his opera, The Marriage of Figaro. But you can see it from any number of places. Here's the cathedral as it looked in Beethoven's day. And it looks pretty much the same nowadays, except that over here where this lady is standing in the bottom left, there's now a subway entrance. But over on the right, there still is the characteristic two-horse, four-wheel fiacre. There's a line of them waiting to take tourists around the center of the city, but they now have automobile tires on them instead of those great big noisy iron wheels. Here's the Mailmarkt, one of the big squares in Vienna, painted at the end of the 18th century. You can tell that because of those two gentlemen casting a shadow in the sunlight with their three-cornered hats and their knee breeches and their shoe buckles. This is painted maybe 30 years earlier than Beethoven's time. And an awful lot has happened since this picture was painted. Things that you might not think would make a difference, but they do. One is the American Revolution. It seems very far away, but I think emperors of Austria notice it when people say, you know, we're tired of our king. We don't want to have a king anymore. We want to be independent. So that's bad enough. Then along comes the French Revolution, where not only do they get rid of their king, they chop his head off. That's pretty bad news for emperors, and they begin to grow up in Vienna and in Austria all sorts of spy organizations, lots and lots of secret police, lots and lots of censorship. Then along comes Napoleon Bonaparte, who overruns all of Europe, including Austria and Vienna. There's a terrible financial crisis, the huge deflation. Things get really bad. Napoleon gets defeated, and all of the powers of Europe gather together in Vienna in 1815 at what's called the Congress of Vienna to sort out the boundaries of post-Napoleonic Europe. And they say that it's at the Congress of Vienna, for which actually Beethoven wrote a cantata called The Glorious Moment. It's far from his most glorious piece, but he was there. They say that it's at the Congress of Vienna that gentlemen first appeared in public in the daytime in trousers that went all the way down to the tops of their shoes, kind of like the ones we used to wear before the COVID crisis. And these gentlemen are wearing old-fashioned knee breeches. So a lot has changed between then and the Congress of Vienna. Well, all of that historical background for something that happens in 1824. Beethoven writes a symphony. And everybody knows in Vienna how symphonies are supposed to work. I mean, it's the city of the symphony after all. This is where Haydn has already produced more than 100 symphonies. Mozart has produced 41 symphonies. People know from symphonies in Vienna in 1824, and they know how they work. Symphonies have 4 separate parts that we call movements. Movement is really just the French word for how fast it goes. And there's a first movement that always starts loud and fast. You have to start loud and fast because you need to call the audience to attention because they're all talking among themselves. And to get them to pay attention to the serious music that comes next, you have to start your symphony loud and fast. And that's what happens. And then that piece gets over, and then comes another piece that we in our wisdom call the second movement. That tends to be slow and lyrical or contemplative or something. And then you have a kind of a 7th inning stretch, a third movement that's a kind of a dance, a minuet in Mozart's and Haydn's day. And then at the end, you have a 4th movement called a finale, sort of an up-tempo, something to send the audience away happy and whistling. And that's how a symphony works. Well, this symphony does not work like that. And I'll bet a lot of his audience scratched their heads when it started. This symphony starts in a way that you don't really even know whether it started or not.